Item: SCP-739. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures: SCP-739 is to be kept in a well-lit room, with its door wedged open at all times. Under no circumstances are any personnel with personality characteristics of grandiosity, psychopathy, sociopathy or solipsism to be assigned to SCP-739. If no such personnel are available, the use of mental alterations to produce such personnel is authorized. When testing is not being conducted, 2D class personnel must be present in the room, and rotated every 3 hours. One is to be positioned within SCP-739 while the second stands immediately in front of the first, and is to ensure that the first D class does not close the door. No testing with SCP-739 is to occur without prior approval from the project director. Any subjects that show signs of hostility after emerging from SCP-739 are to be terminated immediately. Description: SCP-739 is a booth constructed of a lacquered oak measuring 91 cm by 91 cm at its base, 210 cm in height, and 87 cm by 91 cm at its apex. The object is in the shape of a symmetrical trapezoidal prism. The two inward-leaning walls inside of the object each have a mirror affixed to them which face one another and emit a set of climbing reflections, giving the illusion of meeting overhead. The back wall and door on the booth are both featureless and unremarkable. Any visual recordings of the interior of SCP-739 will not record the reflections of the mirrors within. All such recordings show the mirrors as a uniform black coloration, indicating a complete absence of recorded light. Faint whispers can be heard emanating from an indeterminate point within the object. However, individual phrases or voices cannot be distinguished. If a subject or item is present within SCP-739 when the door is closed, said door will be impossible to open for a varying period of time during which the booth shakes violently. After this shaking has ceased, the door can be reopened, and any objects placed subjects within will have undergone a one-dimensional, lateral inversion. All asymmetrical aspects of the subject become reversed, including internal organs and asymmetrical molecules. This change occurs on the molecular level, with L-amino acids becoming D-amino acids. Subjects capable of communication will claim that they are unaffected, and will maintain the perspective that their surroundings are inverted instead. Exposing the subject to the anomalous effect of SCP-739 a second time will revert their lateral inversion. However, some subjects still report minor discrepancies in their environment afterwards. When questioned, subjects will be unable to identify any specific discrepancies, attributing it to an instinctive feeling. After being affected by SCP-739 several times, subjects will begin to display prominent physical and mental divergence from prior to testing. Physical characteristics that are considered undesirable to the test subject 1 will gradually diminish until absent or replaced by favorable characteristics. Altered subjects are unaware of these changes and are insistent that no changes have occurred. Affected subjects will also progressively develop divergent memories of their history prior to exposure to SCP-739. These memories will become more prominent with each time the subject utilizes SCP-739, eventually resulting in a history that the subject would consider more favorable than their true history. However, universally result in the subject being inducted into the Foundation's D-Class regimen for testing with SCP-739. Subjects will lose familiarity with individuals who become increasingly absent in these false memories, and will claim familiarity with individuals that they had never encountered. In most cases, these individuals are purely fictitious, or are portrayed in a stereotyped manner. If the door of SCP-739 is closed without any objects or subjects present within, the item will initially function as though such was present. After unsealing, an entity of unknown physical appearance will emerge from SCP-739. These entities uniformly appear as a featureless, dark blur on any visual recordings they are present on, and are cognitohazardous to observe in person. Personnel questioned prior to amnestization will state the entity is foreign or unknowable, frequently referring to it as something that doesn't exist. All such entities that have emerged from SCP-739 to date have utilized shockwave pulses in order to damage their immediate environment and injure or kill nearby personnel. See Experiment 739-23. Following the initiation of D-Class testing, SCP-739 will no longer recognize the presence of inanimate objects placed within when closed, functioning as though its interior was left empty.